Now, when you're dealing with an invader like Benj, like you mentioned, you have a lot of important decisions that you have to make in literally split seconds because you have him on your half of the map. He's causing trouble. You want to be focusing on DPSing the Primeval. Now, do you get rid of him right away by burning something precious, like maybe your super, maybe your power ammo? What resources are you going to devote to getting that nuisance out of your half of the map? And everything that you throw at him is something that you can't later throw at the Primeval.
And of course, that really comes down to the game of Gambit and its dynamic. There are really two bosses you need to worry about, both the Primeval and the enemy invader. And in this instance, Benj was kind of a menace. He was one of those players that you were just persistently seeing to stress the other team. And I think something else that's really worth saying here as well, I think that when they were DPSing the Primeval at one of those extra phases, they were way too focused on the sprint. Because at the end of the day, when you get to this endgame moment in Gambit, it becomes this series of sprints that makes up a marathon. And it's really easy to focus on that single sprint to say, if I could just get that little bit more damage in, I could potentially kill the Primeval. But the much bigger battle is saying, there is an invader, this is now the priority, forget about the Primeval's HP, we need to focus on this. Because that's about momentum. That's about denying the enemy their chance to get back in the game.
You are so right. I've heard that Gambit Prime, and I agree completely, is essentially a long-distance run. It's a marathon when compared to regular Gambit, which is more of a sprint. And with regular Gambit, it's different. You have 3 rounds. It's first to summon the Primeval. There's less tactics involved because it's very easy to burn down a regular Gambit Primeval. Now in Gambit Prime, you have to pace yourself because you're going to be dealing with a ton of things. Not
that
only
thing
the
has
invader.
a lot of HP.
It's got a lot of HP. You're dealing with the big HP bar on that thick Primeval. You're dealing with the envoys, the rotating, the damage buff comes into play.
The blockers as well, that might be summoned by the other team.
Ruining your day, shielding. The little goblin fivers, they're shielding the Primeval.
And not to mention,
no good.
Previously we actually saw the Knights being the real MVPs for one of the teams there, because I believe it was Team Bread. They got funneled eventually into the sights of Benj there as he was getting one of his big kill streaks on. He was shut down by Wardcliff, but the reason why that mattered is because the Knights had all painted the target area where they were DPSing the Primeval with fire. And the problem with that super hot fire is you can't stand up against it. If you stand in it and you're not in something like a well, you're gonna take damage. You're gonna get struck. It's going to shred you, and you are going to be left on the respawn. And that leaves you as a prime target for the invader, and at the end of the day, you've not DPS'd the Primeval so much as given it breakfast.
Very well put. I think one of Team Redacted, one of their keys to success, they actually had 2 invaders. Did you know? They had Benj, and they had an army of knights. I think they paid off those knights to go over there.
Absolutely.
Now, normally, again, I like the small and medium blockers, those captains that you can get at a 10 mode dunk. They're so annoying. They can teleport everywhere, behind you, in front of you, to the side, but they really got the value out of those knights. The fire was everywhere. That's your favorite thing as an invader, is when other things in the game do your job for you.
Yeah. And aside from anything else, there's this really strong point to be made about the area denial effect on its own. I mean, goblins and captains are in themselves nasty opponents to have to deal with because of the invulnerability shielding they can give, or alternatively just the blinding effect, which makes them less aware of invaders. But realistically, denying an enemy's ability to DPS a Primeval with those knights is almost as strong. It's part of the reason why they are the large blocker. If you can cut out an entire DPS phase without even needing to have an invader over there, that's unbelievably strong. And so I believe there is a small thing to be said about having a strong invader, but using what might actually be a coherent strategy, where you come from behind and you bank a ton of large blockers and simply let them do your job for you. You let them take on the enemy team and really burn them down in the most literal of senses.
That's a very good point. I mean, one of the advantages of getting the Primeval up first is that you have the opportunity to stack damage against it before the other team. And now the downside of getting your Primeval on the field first is, like you mentioned, the other team, if they don't have the Primeval ready, that means they're still going to be banking moats. So while Team A is dealing with their Primeval, they now also have to deal with the increasing annoying problem of never-ending blockers, potentially shielding the Primeval. It's just a nuisance, and you never want to deal with it.
And that really is where it comes all the way back to the defender, I think. The Sentry set is what's really going to help and make the difference here, because it does have all those different perks that make this a really counterable strategy. I think that there is this point to be made, particularly about the perk that gives you regeneration of HP when you're close to the bank. You know, if you are a sentry, and if you have the Safe and Sound perk, which only costs 6 armor points, by the way, so you can acquire this as a reasonably classed Reaper or Collector, you all of a sudden have this ability to hang in the center, clear those blockers, and maybe take a few more hits. And it seemed like such a small thing, but as we saw in that last game, an entire DPS cycle was lost, and one that could have been critical to burning down the Primeval early. I think realistically, that's why the other team actually was able to get on the back foot, from the back foot onto the winning position there. That's why Redacted was able to bring it home. So having that sentry be more cognizant of their role, having them be closer to the bank, and being still ready to clear any of those leftover blockers is a really important part of the journey.
Now let me ask you a question. Pretend for a minute that you are on Team Bread. What are you thinking about right now? What is it that you're feeling about the last game that you just played? Because you started off really good. Didn't end up getting the win. So what are you going to do differently if you were on Team Bread going into the losers final game, which is a do or die scenario?
I think that there is a really, really clear set path for them. For starters, you know what you did wrong. It was not sticking to your strengths and playing to your fundamentals and burning down the Primeval quickly enough. I think that's the way they do this. They treat this as one sprint. They don't do it as much as a marathon. They do a sprint, and they get to the end as quickly as they can. I think that's their key point at which they need to identify what went wrong. The invasion was the point at which it got bad. But, more importantly, they need to not think about the rest of the tournament going forth. This is the point at which they need to get out of their heads. They need to make sure they're there in the room facing off against the next team. Because if they let that win from the enemy weigh them down, and if they think, oh man, now I'm in the losers brackets, I could leave, they're not going to be able to perform as well. There is a real anxiety to playing in this bracket now, and one of these teams is not coming back.
That's a really tough mental aspect of the game that not a lot of people think about, because you're out here trying to hone your strategy, making sure that you are playing at absolute peak performance. But you have a chip on your shoulder. You have this rain cloud over your head. You just lost in the winners finals. Now, if you lose, you're out of the tournament. So you have to do two things at the same time. You have to focus on what you could have done better. What are your core strategies going into the next game so that you can win? And also trying to shake off the bad vibes that are now on your back, because you want to do the absolute best that you can here.
Absolutely. I think that this is one of those key points as well, at which you've got to really hand it to the other side of the team. If we could really quickly see the losers bracket, we actually have, of course, the Bristol teams coming forward. And, of course, we saw the Bristol Smugglers come to the conclusion there as the winners for the losers round 4 final there. But the thing is, the Smugglers now have this amazing opportunity, right? It is a strong path they need to climb, and it's going to be really difficult for them to get there because they need to beat Team Bread, who have, as we've said so many times this tournament, amazing fundamentals. They're so good at what they know what they're doing with. You have to really focus down that team. You need to make sure you stress them. You need to make sure you break them apart, and you need to make them play to your strengths and play to their weaknesses. But if the Smugglers can make it through, they can potentially work their way into that winner's grand final. And the amazing thing about that, even though it's a really tough road, is they're going to have that momentum going forward. They've won all their games today. And that means they will be in a grand position to try and come back from all this.
They have an excellent position to be in. They have the high ground, Anakin. They have won their games. They are sitting pretty in grand finals, waiting for their challenger to approach them. Now, what they have to make sure they don't do
is underestimate their power.
Absolutely correct. If you get a little too full of yourself after your most recent victory, you might get to be a little sloppy, bud.
You might try and do that somersault and end up falling into a bunch of lava.
Where have I heard that story before?
I don't know.
Game of Thrones, is that it?
Yeah,
I
Game
think
of
that
Thrones.
was it.
Absolutely. Clearly, we've got to see Game of Thrones being reenacted here. This is the thing. This is, I think, is the story of Team Bread. Maybe if they make it back into that grand final, this is their redemption arc, you know? It's like the Targaryens being kicked out and then coming back and burning the enemy team down. Maybe that's the victory they're going to serve them. Can you imagine how poetic that justice will be if all of a sudden they make it back into the grand finals and one of the key primeval damage phases sees them summoning a ton of extra large blockers, and then the other team gets burned down and they're able to take a win from that? Can you imagine if that was how the brackets got reset? That would be the story right there. That would be heroic no matter what happens at the very end.
I'm going to call it right now. No matter what we see, I know it's never going to happen. Can we get one moment where
The
one
invader
team puts out multiple thick, big chungus level 20 blockers? Can
I
we
wasn't
please
thinking
make
of
that
this,
happen?
but yes, absolutely.
That needs to happen. It's never going to happen. I think that we don't see that at this level of play because it's incredibly risky.
It is risky because 20 motes down. I mean, think about this. 25 motes is an invasion. 50 motes is the second. 75 is the third.
Correct.
But the most important thing to note about this is that if you have all of that banked on just the one player and they're a little bit out of position, you're done, practically speaking. 20 motes genuinely is the difference between 5% extra damage on the Primeval and being in that leading position. And that's what we saw break down the Bristol Brawlers in that first game that we played today. And it wasn't down to someone killing a giant blocker, but it was one of those really close scenarios. And that's why I think a lot of people have been sort of putting the collector sets on the back burner. But it is high risk, high reward strategy. And the reward of that comes, of course, from the fact that the 20 mote blocker can block the entire bank all on its own. It is basically a second invader with a full armor set and tether. And that one is also something to consider because if you are trying to take it out really quickly, as super players often are prone to do, you got an even bigger problem because if you get, torn out of your super there, that's no orbs of light for your teammate. You've just been taken down. You're weak. You're vulnerable. You can't move. And that particular enemy has a nasty splash damage weapon that it will just be able to pepper the ground around you with. There is a real danger aspect to a giant blocker coming out.
It is massively risky. The definition of high risk, high reward. I don't think we're going to see it, but I can dream. A man can dream.
One of these days, we will see 4 giant blockers being summoned at a Gambit final. I wonder, this would be one of those amazing moments, despite the fact I don't think they can actually do too much of this, because they are going to be locked into their loadouts by the minute they start this game. But can you imagine if the Bristol Smugglers decide to do that? They go in with 4 different sets that are all stuck to Collector, and then all of a sudden it's just, they just dropped 80 motes in the bank.
What is happening right now?
And there is a little bit of a strat to that, because if they can somehow keep their team not so brittle, if they can defend against that first invade, and if they can get all of them down really quickly, there is potential for that. And hell, they didn't even need to bank all of those at once. If they just get one there, that's going to be a significant problem for the enemy team to deal with. And I think that could be their way of getting in the door. This multiple collector strat is also not a terrible one because it keeps you shielded all the time. You've got your umbral armor from picking up a ton of motes. That's really good.
Now, I think if we ever come across a scenario where 4 players on one team at this level of tournament drop 4 level 20 blockers in at one time, that is an automatic forfeit on the half of the other team, right? They just have to put the controller or the mouse.
It's an assertion of dominance.
Put the keyboard away. The game is over. 80 motes? No, I don't think so. The match is officially
T-posing
over.
on the enemy team. That's what they'd be doing.
They're styling.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not quite the Knights dropping the hot fire, but let me tell you, when they're suppressing the other team, that's going to be real troublesome too, because the other team is then going to be stuck with a very high damage Primeval, and then all of a sudden, those blockers come along. You've got those thick boys trundling all over your DPS zone too. There's something else we didn't discuss earlier about them as well. They do have the giant Phalanx shield that is a taken Phalanx shield, and it will boop you out. And that's going to be a real problem for everyone, because all of a sudden, you're going to find yourself flying into a wall at 10,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, the big blocker does bring hardcore boopage to the table. Now, I think mostly what we've been seeing today, and I think what we will continue to see, is that these teams, right off the bat, very organized, very coordinated with their moat dunking. We have seen teams dunking 25 on the dot. They are not going to carry any more than that, even though it's very fun to drop off a possible big boy or multiple big boys. You want to get 25 into the bank no matter what, any way possible, immediately, because 25 opens up that door for invade number 1. You want to get your invader out there on the enemy's field as quickly as you can, every time.
Now, beyond that, I think there's a certain degree of strategy to it, because yes, the first invade is really important and it can set you on the foot forward, but I think there is a further strategy to this, and hear me out. You let the other team bank just a little bit after that. Let's say you're ahead and you've got 30 motes banked and they have something like, say, 15. That's the point at which you want to go ahead and stress them with yet more blockers. And the reason being, of course, is because if 2 or more blockers are deployed, motes will drain from the enemy team's bank into yours. So there is a certain point to be made for having a little bit more of a strong defense, countering their blockers and then immediately thrusting everything back to them. There's a jujitsu action to it, where you use their momentum against you, you deny any of the strikes against yourself that get put forward. And with all of that, you then have this amazing opportunity to fight back. I think that that's something that really could determine the pace of a game, because then you're seeing their motes drain, they come to your bank too, and you're even closer to your next invade.
Absolutely. It's every single decision being made at this level is critical. Nothing has been left to chance on paper for these teams. They have their strategies. They know exactly what is going on. They have everything written down. We want the quick invade. We want to do this at this level of motes. We want to do that. The strategies have been formed. They just have to now execute. And every tiny decision that you make can either make or break the game.
And of course, it is one of those moments where the best laid of plans don't always come to pan out. After all, this is Gambit, you have the enemy invader, you have blockers, you have the ads, which can sometimes pose a problem. Let's say you're going up against Cabal. Scorpius turrets are a terrible thing. Let's say you're going up against Hive. Shriekers are a terrible thing. You want to talk about enemies that will really troll the hell out of you? Let's talk about a pair of servitors that might be making each other immune perpetually. There are things that can go wrong in Gambit that you just can't prepare for.
Do you think we're going to find any teams fighting Scorn out there today? Because we have yet to see any Scorn. Is this going to be kind of like an unspoken rule between any team that competes out there today? Hey, bro, no Scorn.
No Scorn.
No Scorn,
right?
bro.
Nobody likes the Scorn.
What
Nobody wants them. Screebs are terrible. Screebs are infinitely
well, I don't
worse than
wanna hear that
Casterol.
word.
Like, Screeb even itself sounds like the trolliest kind of way of putting something. You know,
Yeah.
You could say it in a really high-pitched voice, and then it perfectly describes the sound that you make as you die.
You know, fun fact, I heard from a developer at Bungie that they didn't actually even plan on creating the Scorn for D2. They just came into the studio one day, and there was a satanic book on the floor, open to the middle with pages torn out, chalk on the floor, and the Scorn were just there in the game. They didn't add those in by.
And they thought, well, I mean, you know, we'll turn over the page and make the darkness, but...
We're hearing the dings
the
in the
team
background.
in the back is going with the dings. It looks like it is indeed going to be Cabal here, and this is Team Bread versus the Bristol Smugglers.
All right, we got an invader with.
Oh, look
here
at
we
that sink! Every time the Bristol Smugglers absolutely have it
I
down
gotta
with
give
their
them the
emotes.
spirit award.
Look at
I
that.
love the
That's
coordination.
wonderful. God, you really can't beat that.
No. So here we have the Redrix's broadsword in the hands of the invader. I happen to love that weapon. For those of you who might not be familiar at home, that pulse rifle, a PvP pinnacle weapon. Now when you activate that perk, the rate of fire goes through the roof. So if you're using that gun in its normal state, nothing really to write home about, Fife. But you get that baby dialed up to 11, and you can carve through an entire enemy team.
Alexa, it's so sad the enemy team is dead. Please play Desperado. In the meantime, though, over here with Team Bread, Enigma and the other team members for Bread are really knocking things down. They're almost at 25. They are now there. Everyone is really quickly going to probably head to the bank and deploy all of their motes. Maybe they'll wait for a few more blockers. It's not totally clear. Either way, Enigma is ready. And
Here
the
we go.
sniper right there.
I
They
think
were
we're going
really
for a
strong
team dunk.
invader.
Are we going to get 25 on the field right away? Yes, we
26
are.
on the field, and the motes are already draining. There's blockers on the other side. It means that the Bristol Smugglers will not be able to bank, and they have motes. They have all of these motes, and it looks like they're now on the sniper's firing line.
Oh, God.
A barricade has been deployed, and it looks like they're going to be cowering behind it for the time being. Sniper shots going off, but nothing connects just yet. Sniper now moving down to a lower level. They're in the Radial
He's in
Warrior.
the
They will
milk.
be
He's in
taking
the hot
damage.
milk.
Oh no! Disastrous start for Enigma there. Such an incredible opportunity to capitalize on that invade. Now it looks like the Smugglers are going to be dealing it right back.
Here we go. We got another machine gun on the field. My favorite type of invade. Let's see if we can get some bullet lasering across the map. Going for one pick. There it is.
Thunderlord laying down fire. That's one death. Now that's two. No motes lost just yet. 3 down.
Go for the 4. Go for the 4. Go
The
deep.
4th. Go into the spawn. You know you want to do it. You know you want to do it. They're now with a player behind them, but the other team is completely oblivious to the fact this invader's out in the field. Oh, 4th
Playing a
player
little
not found.
Ring around the rosy there for a minute.
Incredible. Now, it does look like the other team is going to be pulling everything back with regards to the momentum here. Bristol Smugglers really do have themselves in a nice position. They'll be able to get that second invade up now, and it does look like we're going to see some strong plays because they have the ability to capitalize on whatever small gains have been made.
The Smugglers could have been so much more behind. The Team Bread, they invaded right away. The Smugglers had 3 moats in the bank, and they had a thick gray bar, and they just could not, Team Bread could not pull off the invade. They couldn't get the kills that they needed.
And here they go. Ooh, it looks like he's taking the portal. Oh dear, Exalted PvP coming down here. Going to be trying to use the Redrix Broadsword, I believe, instead of the Claymore here. I'm going to presume it's the Broadsword at least.
We got a 13
going for a 13
target
player.
Here.
They're hiding. Oh no, they're getting flanked by Machine Gun. Hammerhead cutting them down. Exalted PvP not able to get a kill there. Enigma taking them to task.
Excellent flank. Again, as the invader, you have to pay attention to all things. Sometimes you can have those blinders on, and you are only focused on that player with the high moat count. That's all you can think about. You need to get there and pick them off, but you forget about the other people on the team, and you get flanked out of nowhere, and just like that, invasion gone.
It's such a key skill as an invader, this ability to discern between a target that's really good and tasty versus a target that's going to kill you. And it does look like, again, the Smugglers have another invade, and they have 2 blockers up. This is incredible. Looks like Enigma's back, pulling that sniper rifle out. Oh no, but being flanked from the side, just about survives Thunderlord fire. They're going to be really low on HP, and that means they're going to lose about 10 seconds of this invade, but they're not going to get left alone. Oh, the Blade Barrage in response! That's beautiful. Enigma with at least 1 kill coming out of this one. Then getting sent home. It's not perfect, it is not an ideal situation, but Bread at very least was able to make something out of that invade.
Now Team Bread at this point, they are noticeably behind. They are at 45 moats banked to a whopping 97. I think that the Smugglers are about to get their primeval on the field, and they just have. Ooh. Bread really needs to come together and focus if they want to try and bring this game back.
That HVT that just went down on Bread's side might be the difference between getting back in this game and not being able to, but the Smugglers have their primeval up now, and 2 envoys are dead. The 3rd envoy is going to be spawning right here and right now. Even with an invader present on their side, they're in a really commanding lead. The other team has only 73 odd moats banked, and 1 enemy going down there. Enigma looking for a second pickup here. Remember, these kills aren't necessarily going to heal the primeval, but it's definitely going to put the enemy on the back foot.
You want to slow the enemy team down by any means necessary, even if you can't heal the primeval. Any second that you can put back on the clock, holding the other team back from damaging the primeval. Here comes the sword.
The true hero of this Gambit tournament, the Stronghold Sword Sentry. Look at that, just cutting down those enemy blockers. Beautiful stuff. He clears the bank.
Unbelievable.
I cannot believe it. Could we see a sword within the Grand Finals? Could we see a Sword Sentry in these Grand Finals? They're burning down their primeval. Tiny bit of damage, only 1 stack.
Now the Smugglers have gone through their #1 stack of primeval damage. If they play their cards right, if they do everything perfect here, they might have an opportunity at Primeval Slayer #2 to lock in the win and burn down their primeval.
But here comes that invade. Enigma's back, and they're out for blood. And all the enemy is in their sightlines. That's 1 player down. Oh no, but they get cut down by, again, another Thunderlord in return, and now they're damaging Primeval on Bread's side. Something to be done about that. They are starting to burn quite significantly. Cryptarch's camera coming over here. He's trying to get all that damage in, but an invade has just come back.
Wait a minute, what is happening right now?
Oh my goodness!
Here we go. The Smugglers are
going
for the shred.
Going for the win! And the Smugglers have taken down the Primeval!
Wow.
Bristol Smugglers with the heroic story going to the Grand Finals, taking out Team Bread. Every single game of the day has been a win, and the Smugglers will be facing off against Team Redacted in the finals of the Gambit Prime Arena Cup.
Are we in the middle of a Cinderella story right now, Bife? Are we going to see the Smugglers go all the way, carving their way up through the losers finals, going into the grand finals? Look at them, they're hyped up. They're hugging each other, they're jumping around. They know they did a good job.
I've got to say this though, real respect to both the teams. They're going back there, they're shaking hands, they're saying well done to each other. Real sportsmanship on display here.
That's exactly what you want to see. This is the hardest moment of the tournament for a lot of people because you put everything you have into trying to get that W. You work with your team. You're putting in the practice. You're putting yourself on the line, trying to do everything you can to get the win. Oh my gosh, the players are still popping off over here.
You can't see this on camera, but a Bristol Smuggler player literally just jumped into the arms of their friend in celebration.
But yeah, you know, you really want to give respect to both teams that play, either win or lose, because that's what it's all about. It's all about good sportsmanship. This ain't no online Blueberry trash talk fest. We're out here face-to-face with your friends, with your opponents. You want to try and get the win, celebrate with your team, but give a hearty handshake to those who do their best.
Celebrate the fallen as much as you beat them into the ground. Now I have to ask, speaking of those who got beaten, Team Bread put up a really fierce fight there, but it was very close to it. They almost got enough primeval damage to compete there, but in the end, Bristol Smugglers did win out. Now, what do you reckon, Fallen, are the real key reasons why Bread wasn't able to make it? What were the real things they need to learn from that last game when they go back into Gambit when they're playing Destiny outside of this tournament?
That is a terrific point. I have to say that one of the huge pieces to them not winning, I think, was that very first invade. Now, they did an excellent job. They gathered motes in an instant. They had 25 raring to go. The other team only had 3. They sent their invader in. There was a gigantic gray bar. If they had succeeded right there off the bat,
it would have been a completely different story.
It would have been an entirely different game. They failed that invade, unfortunately for them. Didn't waste anybody. They got picked off, sent home with no reward. And you know what? When you get sent back with no reward like that, you're shooting your own team in the foot because that player could have been helping to collect motes.
And then the incredible thing about that invade and how risky that Bank 25 strat really is the fact that then there's that big momentum swing. Because following up after that, the Bristol Smugglers immediately banked all of their motes. They had 25 and they sent an invade in. Now, they didn't do too much with that invade because all the other motes were banked, but that was enough time to put the enemy on the bank foot. And more importantly, the blockers were down there draining motes from Team Bread's bank, and that's the real win there. Because when you have 4 blockers and the enemy team is nowhere to clear them, you're just going to be casually gaining motes and getting towards your next invasion. And that's going to be a big momentum thing in its own.
You're exactly right. Team Bread went all in right away with that play. It did not pan out for them. And again, the other team, because they managed to fight off their invader effectively, they lose nothing. Absolutely nothing. They have all the time in the world. They can dunk their motes right away, send all those taken all the way back to the other side of the map, and then they can counter-invade. So I think what Bread needed to do right there was have a stronger invade off the bat. That's definitely not the only factor on the table that caused that loss, but it was a very noticeable mistake in their opening gameplay.
I mean, let's make no mistake here as well. Enigma is a fantastic invader, and that's very clear, but I think one of the really interesting things is whilst they were able to compete with Benj on the other side while facing off against Redacted, and in all fairness, gave Benj a run for his money, there was this problematic moment when Enigma would be up against the entire enemy team, wouldn't be able to get their first hit in, would just about kill one person, have another damage. By that point, the enemy invader, who is still defending with their team at this moment, is stuck with them, has lasered in on them with Thunderlord. And at that point, when you've got Hammerhead versus Thunderlord and you're trying to do the damage, there isn't really a contest. You've lost some HP, you're no longer damaging that one player. It is simply a case of you are going to, by the numbers, fall down and die. Even with your invader overshield, you had an entire team shooting back at you. And I think that's where all of it really does stack up. It's really about that team play from the Bristol Smugglers.
The Smugglers did a fantastic job. Every time the invader from Team Bread came in, the Smugglers were ready. There was not one time I can remember where the Smugglers were caught off guard and that Bread really took it to them in the invade session. Now, they had 1 or 2 picks here and there, but for the most part, it's like something you see out of the Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
A polar bear is trying to go in to get a walrus for a kill, and the walrus is all kind of huddled together in a massive wall of blubber and tusks.
You don't want to go there. Those tusks are sharp.
Blubber and tusks, baby. And they were just doing an excellent job of fending and fencing out the invader. They kept their composure. They turned their attention to the invader right away. Killed the invader. Carry on with DPSing the Primeval, and that's exactly what they needed to do.
Now, Polar Bear may not have been the invader on that particular team going up against the walruses of the Bristol Smugglers, but I feel like that's an incredibly apt analogy all the same. They were just this constant, omnipresent, omniscient defense, where whenever somebody invaded, they only had a certain amount of time before the defense coalesced and everybody put fire on them and just shut them out entirely. And there were some really fantastic plays generally. There was a really keen knowledge on the other team with the Bristol Smugglers of when was the right time to push the invader. You had, I believe it was the second invade from Enigma, when they got completely and utterly shut down in the opening. They wouldn't even have needed to kill Enigma with that particular Thunderlord. It would have needed to be something truly spectacular for them to need to finish them off. Because at that point, they're on a hunter, they've all of a sudden lost half their HP, it's going to take 10 seconds or so for that to regen fully, and then they only have 8 seconds left on that invade. So realistically, no matter what happened, it would have needed to be balls to the wall play in order to actually get that done. So I think I got to say it, congratulations to the Bristol Smugglers, you guys did an amazing job. Commiserations to Team Bread, excellent work as well.
Now, we have to tell you that we are not done with this tournament yet. We have the grand finals coming up, and that is going to be the Smugglers versus Team Redacted.
Team Redacted.
It's going to be a great match. It's going to be best of 3. I wonder if the Smugglers will be able to reset the bracket. It's going to be incredible Gambit action. So right now, we are about to go ahead and take a quick intermission. So don't go anywhere unless it's to get a drink or a snack. Come on back. We'll see you in just a few minutes. Stick around.